Hey, that looks like somebody here helping us out, covering for Phil. Hi, Chris.
Howdy.
Did we order a sandwich for you?
I hope so.
Okay.
Okay.
If not, there's an extra tuna club with no avocado that's up for grabs. I'm sad to say.
I don't know if that's true.
I'm having coffee and graham crackers if it makes you feel better. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today, for finding your way out through the snow or to a computer. Yeah, nice job, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Bend Metropolitan Planning Organization. Let's go ahead. I'll call this meeting to order and let's do introductions. Tyler, would you please get started around the table?
Yes, Tyler Diekey, Bend MPO manager.
Kelly Kennedy, Bend MPO.
Ariel Mendez, he, him, Bend City Council.
Chris Doty, Deschutes County Road Department, sitting in for Commissioner Chang today.
Don Morehouse, ODOT Land Use and Transportation Planner. And I'm here today to talk about the Baker Road IAMP. We have the consultant on board, DKS. We have John Boston giving a presentation along with Kayla Bleskis. And great to see everybody here.
Bob Townsend, ODOT Area Manager.
Greg Brandt, resident.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm Barb Campbell. I serve on the Bend City Council and I'm chair of this meeting. And a moment ago, I noticed that we have James Sorofi, who has also zoomed in. Thank you so much, James. We're happy to have you. And have we got anybody else, Tyler, online we should introduce?
We have Kimala Lutz from the City of Bend Finance Department.
Hi all.
And Samantha Nelson, City of Bend Finance Director. I think that's it. Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, and we have John. Oh, go ahead, Barb.
Nope, you go ahead.
And we have John Boskett from DKS online as well.
Great. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for being up and out or at your computers on this snowy day. I know the kids are home from school playing in the snow. Well, we have work to do. We have streets to build. All right. What's our next order of business, Tyler? I bet it's hybrid meeting guidelines. I knew it. Tyler, will you take us through this?
Yes, I'll do this pretty quick. The meeting's being recorded. And for those online, please use the raised hand feature if you have questions, and we will call on you.
That's great. Thank you. That gets us to our next agenda item, which is opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment to the board of the Metropolitan Planning Organization? I don't see any hands, but I'm really depending on you, Tyler, to help me look for any hands or anyone who would like to speak. So I think we can go ahead and move on. All right, we need a new chair, well, a chair and vice chair for the next meeting. These will be for the calendar year of 2024, and I would accept motion for either chair, vice chair, or both.
Well, I don't know if you could be both, Barb. I'm kidding. Barb, have you given consideration to serving as chair again, or I didn't get a chance to touch base with you about this?
Thank you, Ari, for asking. And I would be happy to serve again if you would like me to do that.
Who's our current vice chair?
Commissioner Chang.
Yeah, Commissioner Chang.
Well, I hate to appoint him in his absence, but
That's how it works. It's happening. Well, okay, Chris?
I
I
move,
texted him earlier and silence is approval.
I'll make a motion and then we can discuss it. But I move to appoint Councilor Campbell to serve as chair and Commissioner Chang to serve as vice chair of the policy board for 2024.
I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilor Mendez and a second from Mr. Townsend. How about discussion? I would say that I would really be so happy to, let somebody have a chance to, move over, something like that. But in this organization, it does kind of seem to be between the two elected members of the group. Bob, would you say maybe you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. And I really do appreciate Phil continuing to serve on this board, even though it does seem to be a bit of a stretch for him. So as much as I would be happy to move over and let somebody else, I think somebody else would be Phil, and it just doesn't seem like he has the time for any additional responsibilities. So from my perspective, I would be happy to serve, and I think it would be okay if we elected Phil to vice chair in his absence. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll have a vote. All those in favor, the motion is to have myself as chair and Phil Chang as vice chair for our policy board for 2024. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. I haven't checked the rules. I think it's probably pretty easy to remove me if you decide you want to. So for now, I'll be happy to serve for another year, everyone. Thank you. All right, that brings us to meeting minutes. I believe we need a motion to approve the minutes from the January 19th, 2024 policy board meeting.
I move to approve the January 19th, 2024 policy board draft meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second to approve meeting minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. And that starts to get us on to things that are more interesting. We've got our annual financial report for fiscal year 23. Kamala Lutz.
It's okay.
And Samantha Nelson are kind enough to be here with us from the city of Bend. Thank you so much, Kamala. You take it away and you can tell me how to say your name.
Yeah, no worries, Barb. My name is Kamala Lutz. I am the, as Tyler mentioned before, the accounting and financial reporting manager for the city of Bend. And part of my job is I lead the audit process. So I'm here today to just give a little quick overview of the MPO's audited financials for the fiscal year ending 6/30/2023 and the results of that audit. So as some of you may know, the MPO has an IGA with the city to act as the MPO's fiscal agent. So the city performs all administrative and accounting, which includes this annual audit process. The city of Bend currently has a contract with Moss Adams as our auditor. And through that contract with the city of Bend, they also audit the city and the borough. Moss Adams, for the fiscal year ending in 2023, issued a unmodified or clean opinion, which is what you want to hear. basically stating that there are no material misstatements, everything was correct and accurate. And you can find those results on PDF page 5 of the financials, or report page 2. The auditors also issue a report on compliance and internal controls over financial reporting in accordance with Oregon state minimum standards. The auditors noted no non-compliance and there were no material weaknesses, which is again what you want to hear. I recommend that people, if you don't want to read through the full set of financials, just read through the MD&A, the management discussion analysis. It gives you a really great overview of kind of what's happened, and what we're looking at going forward for the MPO. Overall net position increased slightly this year due to some investment earnings, around 27,000, on the COVID funding that we received from ODOT in fiscal 22. The MPO's assets were sitting at about 1.6 million at fiscal year end, which were consisting of 78,000 of ODOT grant receivables and that 1.5 million of COVID funding that I mentioned earlier before. So in the past, the MPO has operated as a zero net position. Our expenses equal our revenues. Going forward with this COVID funding, we'll continue to have a positive net position as we spend that down. And due to some structural changes with how ODOT will be handling other grants, the MPO will continue to have a positive net position. Is there any questions? Talked really fast, so. Awesome.
I will say, Kimala, I'm imagining I'm speaking for Tyler and Andrea and Kelly when I say how fortunate we are to have the City of Bend Finance Department to be our partner in our own finances. And for me, it's just year after year after year. Clean is that term I'm used to. Clean audit reports, and just really grateful, Kimala. We appreciate all of your help and the cooperation partnership we have with the City of Bend.
Thank you. We really enjoy working with the MPO. So
that's great. All right. If there aren't any further questions or discussion, I would look for a motion.
I move to accept the fiscal year 2023 BMPO annual financial report.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second motion from Councilor Mendez and a second from Mr. Thompson. What did I call you? Mr. Thompson, Mr. Townsend. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And there are none opposed, so that makes that unanimous. And again, thanks so much. Thank you, Kimala. And just honestly pass around to your department how much we appreciate you all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Barb.
Okay. All right. That takes us to our need to appoint a resident to our technical advisory committee and our budget committee. We had excellent applications for this committee, and myself and Councilor Mendez were happy to look through those applications, and we have a recommendation. We would like to recommend James Jerofi to serve a 3-year term on our budget and technical advisory committee. Councilor Mendez, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I think we were really fortunate to have 2 very strong applicants to this. You know, it's always a kind of a very fortunate situation to have a hard choice. We had one applicant that I think we are not recommending today because although they were very strong and had impressive credentials and background, we had some questions about their interest and suitability for transportation related activities that I think are relevant for this position. And given James's extensive participation and background and knowledge in transportation matters, we felt like he would be a very good fit for this, for both of these committees. And so we were very happy to present him for the board's approval and appointment.
Thank you, Ari. Well said. Well said. And with that, if you'd like to make a motion.
I move to approve James DeRofi to serve 3-year terms on the Budget Committee and Technical Advisory Committee.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And my eye is enthusiastic. James, as Ari mentioned, has participated, been involved with, paid attention to transportation issues in the city of Bend for years, as well as this committee. He logs in and pays attention. James, I couldn't help but notice that you were online. Would you like to say hello?
Sure, Barb. How's everyone doing? It's just so exciting to discuss long-term transportation with a bunch of engineers, accountants, and politicians. Really, I mean, this is the creme de la creme of entertainment right here. So, no, thank you. I accept the sentence of 3 years.
James, honestly, thank you so much. In particular, our TAC. Yeah, I really do. I think you're going to find it to be interesting and hopefully kind of exciting. That is the committee where you do get to work with representatives from just everywhere, the school district and the parks district, and, you know, really have boots on the ground thinking about our holistic transportation system. So I hope it's a good fit for you. We're certainly happy and excited to have you on board, James.
I will keep my happy face the whole time.
Excellent. Happy faces. Excellent. All right. That will take us to our next agenda item, which is the US 97 Baker Road Interchange Area Management Plan. And Dawn Morehouse is with us today from ODOT, as is John Bosket. And thanks so much for being there today. Dawn, maybe you're the one who gets to have a tuna sandwich with no avocado. And I will let you take it away.
Great. Yeah, no, I will definitely eat that sandwich if other policy board members or other meeting attendees are going to eat it. Yeah, it's good to be here today. I don't have very much experience here at the policy board. I think possibly the last time I was here was back when we did the initial presentation for the Baker Road IAMP. So yeah, the last couple of years have flown by. We had the project on hold for a bit, and yeah, just recently we've started it again, and we have a draft interchange area management plan and IAMP for Baker Road at this time. And yeah, it's going to be great to get it in front of the policy board here, and it's going to be great to take the final steps to close it out and get it adopted. Got John Bosket here from DKS. DKS has been the prime consultant on the project, and he's going to walk us through the alternatives and the preferred alternative. And yeah, we're looking at wrapping up this project within the next several months. And so I believe this is an informational item. However, we are asking that the MTP that's being updated now reflects the Baker Road IAMP. So that's somewhat of an action item today. So with that, yeah, I'm going to have John Bosket enter into the presentation. Thanks, John.
Hey, you bet. Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So what I wanted to cover here was just kind of a reminder or update on the project status, just kind of expanding on what Dawn had said. And again, I know because it's been, we were on pause for a year there. I know some of you were around during the earlier part of the project, and we had done a couple of presentations to the policy board here, which we've been using as our steering committee, also for our project. And so this was our plan to kind of final check-in with this group before we finish off the project. And so knowing it's been a bit of a span of time there since most of you have probably seen this presentation is probably a little bit longer than it would have been than maybe when we originally planned it out. I'll try to do my best to remind you of some of the stuff that we did before we took the break and what we had already decided and what's new since that time. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So as far as kind of what we did and what's left to do, we started this out as kind of the typical planning process. We kind of stepped back and made sure we described what the need for the project was, what were the key issues. And then we met with the policy board and our committees to frame up the goals and objectives for the project, which we used to kind of screen the different alternatives that we developed through the process. So that was our first kind of check-in with the policy board. Then we moved on, evaluated today conditions out there today for driving, walking, biking, safety. But also what would they look like by the year 2040 with all the expected growth, especially the growth to the east of our interchange here at Baker Road. And then we worked with our committees, our technical advisory committee and our community advisory committee to develop a range of concepts to improve the interchange area, kind of refine that down to 3 alternatives that we thought were pretty viable, and then worked further to evaluate those and select a preferred alternative from the bunch. And that's when we came back again to the policy board to check in and kind of explain the 3 alternatives we looked at and what the recommendations for the preferred alternative were, and look to you for confirmation that we were on the right track and to move forward with that, which we got. And then we started working on the next steps and documenting this together. And that's kind of when the pause happened. And so my bullets are entirely chronological. The last 3 there explain kind of some of our public outreach. And nearly all of that happened prior to the pause. So we'd done 2 online open houses and had 4 meetings with our advisory committees prior to that. So then kind of coming out of that break, we added did a couple of elements for the plan. There was an access management plan, and then a discussion of what actions are needed to implement the plan. So we wrote those up, incorporated those into the draft IAMP report. And then just last week, we had our final meeting with our technical advisory committee. And then just a couple of days ago, had our last meeting with our community advisory committee and got support all around to move forward with the IAMP report. But just a handful of things that they wanted us to document, just to make sure it was added into the report for, I guess, it may be some time before a lot of this gets implemented. So for whoever's picking this up, the planners, engineers, elected officials, and whenever this moves forward, if there's certain considerations we want to make sure they keep in mind. There's just some things we want to document there. So not a lot of changes to the report that you've seen. And then going forward, we've got, again, our final policy board meeting today. Again, is kind of looking for that same input. As Dawn had mentioned, I think in the agenda, it says there's no action items required. There is one thing, that I'll get to as far as how this relates to the MTP update. I think a pretty simple modification, and I'll describe later. But also is similar to the input that we got from our advisory committees. If you think of any kind of notes or considerations you would like us to put in that plan for the future people that implement this, I'd love to hear that. And then based on the input we receive, we'll do any revisions we need to the draft report. And then as our final steps, at least as the consultant team goes, we had planned to do a kind of present this plan to the Bend Planning Commission and Transportation Commission. We believe that's just informational. We don't think there's any action items for them that they need to adopt this, given where the location of our project area is. And then also would do a presentation to the County Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners, who ultimately we would want to adopt the plan. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So again, the purpose of this meeting, again, it's kind of a final check-in to remind you what's in here. And again, if you can think of anything you'd like us to add into this plan, any considerations, you can let us know. Go ahead and
John?
Yes.
Hi, John. Thank you so much. Just before you even, can I just ask about your community advisory committee? How is that selected? Thank you, please.
Yeah, so I had somewhere here in my list. There you go. So
I'm sorry. Just,
yep.
Just in general.
I can kind of tell you of the makeup of this, right? I think it's a lot of times we try to kind of pick a diverse mix of people that might be affected by the project. And well, we invited kind of a wide range of folks. Attendance at times kind of diminished, especially as the project went on, but we still kind of mailed things out and tried to get feedback from folks. So we had a representative from Deschutes River Woods, who's actually in the room with you there, I think today. Thank you, Greg. Bend Lapine School District, Bend Parks and Rec, Central Oregon Coalition for Access, Abilitree, Deschutes County Ped Bike Advisory Committee, the Riverwoods Country Store, and the Morningstar Christian School, who are right there in the interchange area, and the Homeless Leadership Coalition, who we had invited. It's like the level they were always able to make all the meetings. I understand there's people have competing objectives, but that's who we strive to get all of our feedback from.
Thank you, John. I'm sorry to interrupt you in the middle of but go right ahead. Thanks so much.
All right. So again, just the report itself, if you've looked at that, the first 4 chapters that was kind of the stuff that we presented before. It's probably not a lot of new there, but it just kind of documents our process, what the issues were, what the alternatives were we considered, and then obviously what the preferred alternatives that we want to move forward with. Talks a bit about some of the phasing, design considerations, and things like that, and costs. And then there's the newer parts in chapter 5 and 6, and that was, which I'll touch on a little bit in my presentation. What is this access management plan? What's it mean? In the highlighting some of the management actions to go with this, as well as what's needed to implement. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm just going to, again, because it's been a while, just remind you, what were these alternatives that we looked at? What was the direction we got from our committees, and what do we want to move forward with? So there's kind of 3 main alternatives this all came down to. And you can just go ahead and go to the next slide. And you might have to look really close to your screen here at this level. It's a little hard to see. If you zoom in, these look great. So the first alternative we looked at, it was our lower cost alternative. Again, one of the big issues we had here, in addition to this just being an old rural interchange that obviously wasn't built to accommodate the kind of development we're expecting east of here. There was the bad offset with Baker Court and the southbound ramps, and just the proximity to the railroad. So there's all these conflicts going on kind of around where the Riverwood Country Store is on the west side of the interchange. And so one of the main things we had to accomplish was fixing all those conflicts, or else anything we did probably wouldn't work well. And the way that this one approached doing that was to say, well, how about if we just align, shift the southbound ramps over a little bit further, closer to the railroad, which isn't ideal, but it would align it with Baker Court. And if we signalize that, that still gives us the ability to coordinate that with rail crossings, clear out vehicle queues, things like that. On the east side of the interchange, all of these alternatives use a roundabout at the North Ramp Terminal. I think a lot of the feedback we got from the community was there was definitely a preference for roundabouts over signals, but in this particular case, given the railroad coordination that was kind of going to be a key issue on the west side, we felt we had to go with the signal because a roundabout would probably shut down all the movements every time a train goes through, which happens fairly frequently here. Whereas with a signal, we can keep probably half the movements going and keep that cleared. So, but that said, you'll notice on the bottom of all of these, there's a little inset that shows, well, what if we did only traffic signals? And that's because any roundabouts we're proposing on the state highway system has to go through the stakeholder engagement process. We have to go to the mobility advisory committee. So it's kind of like, just in case we can't move forward with roundabouts in the future, we need a viable alternative that still works, that uses traffic signals. So it's kind of our backup plan.
John,
yeah.
Can I ask, and so do you mean you have the technology to link that signal to the railroad crossing signal?
Yeah, yes.
Yep. All right.
Yeah, and actually, you see in our preferred alternative, it looks to skip to the end. It actually is this alternative, but we signalize Cinder Butte as well, which is going to help us clear vehicles out of there better if any rail crossings happen.
Got it.
One quick note on the costs on these. Don't look too closely at them. The first three slides I'm going to show you, it was like when we were still early in trying to evaluate alternatives, these costs were kind of rough. The important thing is the relative difference. On the last slide, you see when we picked our preferred alternative, we sat down with ODOT a bit and really went over more recent trends in construction costs and sharpened the pencil. Unfortunately, the costs went up a lot, but it would have happened to all of them fairly equally. So this one still was our lower cost alternative. Go ahead and go to the next one. Then with this one, this is a more traditional diamond interchange shape, uses roundabouts for both the ramp terminals. Here we were trying to solve the conflict problems on the west side by trying to shove the ramps as far towards US 97 as we could. In the end, it was better than obviously what's there today. It still didn't work quite as well as we would have liked because some of those conflicts remained. And one of the big concerns also that I'll touch on later, we've got these regional trails that are planned to come through this interchange and need to connect up. And this was the only alternative that kind of forced us into having a multi-use path with these regional trails crossing the south side of that new roundabout on the west side, which wasn't ideal. All the other alternatives, we don't have any street crossings. So it's a kind of a big bonus for the other ones. So this was kind of a mid-cost one. We ended up, obviously not moving forward with this one. And then go ahead and go to the next slide. This is our highest cost alternative. Here, the idea to resolve those conflicts on the west side was we just moved the whole all the interchange ramps over to the east side. And just had one single roundabout there with all those ramps coming together. And this one did a lot of things really well. It scored really well in a lot of our evaluation criteria. But it didn't do well in cost. This one cost, at least twice as much as I think our lowest cost one. And it kind of came with some construction complexities. See these big flyover ramps, right, that have to go from one side of the expressway to the other to get to that ramp terminal. And so in the end, if you go to the next slide. So in talking with our two committees, and it was great because there's really good alignment between the two. So it made making the decision fairly easy. Really, there was a lot of support for that last alternative because it did a lot of things really well, but obviously there was concern just over the cost and some of the complexity of construction. So in acknowledgement that alternative 2 really wasn't as good as the other two alternatives. So alternative 1 was decided to be the preferred alternative with a little bit of variation to it. At the same time, we were asked to keep alternative 3 as a long-term option. So kind of still keeping it in the back pocket if in case that kind of funding should become available, or maybe if growth to the east at some point in the future, maybe beyond our planning horizon, was a lot more than we expected. So the idea would be when we phase alternative 1, and it might show on the next slide if you go to the next slide, would be as much as we can, since we want to build a roundabout on the east side anyway, if we can do the construction in a way that is compatible with the conversion to that alternative 3 in the future, that's what we want to do to at least not have too much throwaway cost. If we even get at that point in the future, don't know, but that's the way it's documented in the plan. We want to move forward with alternative 1, but we still want to keep kind of 3 in the back pocket in case we need it. And there's some discussion. Oh, there's the new updated cost there shown too. Again, kind of it about doubled or more than doubled from what we originally penciled, because as you probably experienced, construction costs were going up quite a bit at the time we were working on this, and probably still are. And so it's about $38 million for everything is the at least rough planning level assumption here. If you need to break that into phases, the recommendation is you should probably do west side improvements first, because a lot of those conflicts that we were talking about, if you don't fix those, they tend to create more problems than the needs on the east side do. But honestly, it's like ideally improvements are needed everywhere. So I mean, as soon as they can get the improvements, they are needed. But said if you had to phase it for funding reasons, starting on the west side would be the way to go. And then this also shows that refinement I was talking about, where we also want to signalize Cinder Butte, which I believe is consistent with the county's TSP, but also it's going to help us clear out any vehicles that are queued up between those 2 intersections at the ramp terminal in Cinder Butte if we have a rail crossing. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So a couple slides here just on the walking and biking improvements, since I think most of the discussion I was kind of focusing on the driving parts. I think we actually kind of started with the framework for what we wanted to do with active transportation before we got into a lot of the motor vehicle improvements when we were doing this project. And part of the reason was, as I mentioned before, we've got these planned regional trails that are coming from the north and the south right through this area. And it was really important to everybody on the committees that with whatever we build here, we maintain the safety of those trails, and I think the level of kind of comfort and attractiveness too, right? There was a big priority on not having any at-grade street crossings while we have to connect these up. And so we've got the trail coming up from the south that's shown on there. We wanted to make sure that our design was compatible, whether or not that trail ends up going on the east side or the west side of US 97, right, from Lava Butte. It's going to work with our plan. The other is we have the Arnold Canal Trail that would come in kind of along Knott Road from the east there. So see that one comes in. We also on this show an optional trail. It's not really likely given everything else that will be here. But if somebody really wanted to, you could do an optional trail that went up along the canal, crossed underneath US 97 to the north along the canal, and then came back and connected up. So again, the key components of this are, if you notice at the northbound ramp intersection, we've got the symbols there for tunnels. So we would actually connect these trails up going underneath Knott Road and underneath the northbound ramp. So we don't have any street crossings. And then also, as I'll show a little bit more on the next slide, we've got that multi-use path on the south side of the interchange. So it's really kind of an extension of the trail system. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So that's a little bit more detail on what the overcrossing would look like, where the left side of the screen with the multi-use path, that's the south side of the interchange. So we went through kind of a lot of iterations on what we wanted to do here with our committees, but in the end, we all really liked just the continuation of this path system on the south side, helping tie it all together. The north side probably looks a little bit more traditional, with it's got a buffered bike lane and sidewalk, which is probably going to look more like what you're going to see to maybe the east of the project area. Maybe as Knott Road comes in. And then there was, in our last committee meeting, related to this cross-section design, because the future design team can refine this a bit, is we do want to make sure it's noted in the plan that whatever the future design team does, we want to make sure we maintain enough width of roadway between the curbs to accommodate evacuation scenarios, specifically like from Deschutes River Woods. So if we need to cone this off and we want 2 lanes heading east to get out of Deschutes River Woods, but need to maintain the 1 lane going west, that we can do that. I think with what we've shown, that's you can accomplish that. But again, as this goes through and future design refinement, we just want to make a note in the plan to make sure that's not forgotten. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then just quickly, I got a couple slides on that access management plan. So this was the new stuff, right? Since we have been to the policy board. Access management plan, it's basically the IAMPs are required to have these in them. And really the idea is, since such a big investment goes into interchange area improvements, right? In this case, 38 million bucks. We want to make sure that that investment is being preserved. Remember, the classic example is the problem that we already have, where bad locations of streets or driveways, in this case, what I'm showing here is Baker Court and the southbound ramps. We could dump a lot of money into improving the area, but if we don't fix that problem with the offset movements, it's not going to work well, and it's not going to be safe. And so the access management just kind of looks at or provides more guidance for managing driveway locations or new street locations to make sure we don't kind of degrade what we're, the improvements that we want to put in there, and that we get the level of safety we want. And then, honestly, it's when those changes will happen, because this is just a planning document. It's likely going to happen with any future design phase, or if there's any land use applications that happen in this area is when this would kind of be applied. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So our access management plan is required to have what's called key principles and methodology. And basically that's just our decision-making criteria. So it's kind of clear to the public why, what we're going to consider, what, somebody in the future will consider if there's going to be a change to an access location. And we modeled it very much after our goals and objectives for the project, which seemed appropriate. In fact, the key principles here are the goals of the project. So our any decisions being made should be consistent with what we said was important from the outset. And then, as is required, ODOT mailed those out to the property owners, and they had a 3-week period to kind of respond, comment, ask for revisions, so forth. My understanding is nobody responded, so we went forward in the plan with what we had. That said, that is not the last time anybody can request a change or anything like that to that decision-making criteria, because then as any design phase goes forward, again, there's a requirement for ODOT to kind of put that again out for property owner comment, but it's also going to involve its own public outreach effort, which again will include a lot more, kind of interaction involvement with property owners. So, like I said, not the last opportunity for somebody to comment. And it's understandably a little bit hard to comment on something at this point when you don't understand what's going to happen. Because if you look at the key principles, methodology, and even the actions, they're not very detailed and specific, right, for each driveway and piece of property. As you go to the next slide, I think I touch on this. Our goal in the actions was to provide enough guidance to accomplish things that would be consistent with this plan and kind of maintain the level of safety and operation we want. At the same time, we're not very detailed and prescriptive in most cases, because we want enough flexibility for people in the future to make decisions that make sense given the conditions that are there in that day. I think you can go on to the next slide. Other management strategies that we mentioned, it's kind of in addition to showing the concrete and asphalt stuff on those drawings. that we put in the plan is we'd like to include consideration for reducing the posted speed on Baker and Knott through this area after the improvements are constructed. It's 35 miles an hour today, just as a point of reference. But obviously, as more development happens to the east and these improvements come in, it's going to look a lot more kind of urbanized and hopefully have more people out there than you see today. It's not going to look as much as a rural interchange. So that can help with safety a bit. As I mentioned before, maintaining and enhancing evacuation routes for the southwest and southeast communities out here. It's again not just during construction, but also as the design team looks at refining those cross sections to make sure they're accommodating the need to evacuate folks. Making sure we add wayfinding signage with those regional trails, and if a trailhead goes in there. Managing the new interconnected traffic signals on Baker Road at the ramp terminals as well as Cinder Butte to prioritize safety. The intent there is sometimes I imagine ODOT's going to end up maintaining these signals. And sometimes you get close. Let's say the scenario is maybe somebody says, hey, I have a complaint about the way the Cinder Butte signal's timed. I'm not getting a ability to turn out. I want there to be more green time on Pocahontas and Cinder Butte. So ODOT may go look and see if they can refine that and improve it. But as they do that, to make sure the priority is always going to be on safety, which in this case is probably making sure that we are able to clear the queues off the southbound ramp, right? Because that Cinder Butte signal is going to be very closely tied in timing to the southbound ramp terminal. So we wouldn't want to prioritize efficiency to the degree that now we're queuing traffic down the southbound ramp and onto the parkway. So we just want to make a note of that. And the last thing was during this process, the transit stop in the area moved to the end of Baker Court down there by the store. And so right now it's a little bit of a cul-de-sac. There's some undeveloped property there. Don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we just wanted to add a note that if, development changes in that little area and changes happen in the cul-de-sac, we want to make sure that people account for the ability of transit to get turned around and maintain the use of that stop. I'm going to go to the next slide. And I think my last slide on implementation here should be fairly simple. So we do need Deschutes County to adopt the IAMP as a legislative amendment to the comp plan, AKA this is a refinement of the TSP. So it's basically would be adopted as kind of an extension of their transportation system plan. ODOT then would also adopt the IAMP as a refinement to the Oregon Highway Plan. As far as what we'd mentioned about the Bend MTP, what I'm showing on the screen right now, it's technically already in your MTP. It's just kind of vague and it's lumped in with a bunch of other parkway projects, right? And the cost is TBD. And so now that we know more about it, we would just want it to just be split out. We can provide its own project description and cost. So it's more clear what's intended down there. And given that I think your MTP is on schedule to be updated in the fall, the timing seems to be working out where we could get that done. And then as I did mention before, part of the implementation also needs to be, the plan needs to be brought to Mobility Advisory Committee for their feedback, kind of looking at freight movement through the interchange area, oversized vehicles, any concerns they may have. But hopefully we've provided enough flexibility in there that they'll be satisfied at least through this planning stage, but design phases would also need to be brought to them. And next slide, which might be my last one. There we go. That was my last one. So that concludes what I had to present to you. So yes, I'd take any other questions or comments.
I've got a question.
Go right ahead.
Thanks for that presentation, John. This is Ariel Mendez. Two questions for you. One is, I think it's easy for me as a city councilor to tell that this is outside of the city boundaries because we see those 12-foot wide lane widths. The city has moved to a narrower standard, and there's been recent research out of Johns Hopkins University last year that demonstrates how effective narrower lanes can be on reducing speed and increasing safety. So I'm wondering if that might be part of the IAMP's future plans. And, you know, maybe that's a question for the county really, but be nice to see that conversation take place. And then the second question is how land use is taken into account in the different scenarios. You know, the Deschutes, the country store there, the Riverwoods Country Store is, I think, a pretty beloved amenity for a lot of residents down there. You get a bite to eat, get some gas. And you can see if ODOT had the same interchange arrangement that it has on the east side, that if they had mirrored that on the west side, well, there would be no place for the store. So I'm kind of wondering if there's, you know, how come we don't consider that sort of, you know, U-shaped on-ramp in the southeastern quadrant, because that would potentially free up the northeastern quadrant for surplus property, you know, near the back nine golf course there that could be put to some, you know, higher use than just an on-ramp. So those are the two questions. One is about lane width, and the other one is how does land use considerations get factored in here? Because I generally think the less space that this stuff takes up, the better. So I'd just like to hear a little bit about that thinking.
Yeah, sure. On the first point on the 12-foot lanes, I know we went kind of back and forth with the committees on different variations of that cross section. And I think what it's really going to come down to when this actually gets designed, it's probably going to be more the curb to curb width driven more by the evacuation needs, right? If we really want to make sure that we can put some cones down, keep 2 lanes going out in one direction, one in the other. And at the end of the day, you know, if it could be years before this goes forward, right? So county ODOT opinions on needs for freight movement, so on, could vary. At that point, it's just a striping situation, right? If we know we need a certain curb to curb width to maintain the evacuation scenario. So I would say, you know, that's still on the table for the future if they wanted to change that. On the land use side, I think kind of our preference was kind of it's kind of like looking at a combination of things. It's one, it's minimizing cost, right? So maybe kind of how much of the footprint can we retain, kind of considering what's there. And on the east side, we've kind of already got the kind of the typical diamond shape. And, you know, sometimes we probably, the other thing would be just efficiency of the movements, right? Looking at where the predominant turn needs to be and what's kind of more effective. So it's possible, you know, including the loop might have, you know, maybe create a left turn with heavy movements that we could have avoided otherwise. But also I would say, you know, the loops aren't always maybe a preferred design. It can depend on your situation. I know it's, you know, an area, especially maybe where we've got, you know, freight movement. I know that we need to accommodate. It can get icy conditions. Sometimes those loops maybe aren't the most favorable, right, for them. So I think, you know, we probably didn't look at replacing that on the east side, largely because it's the existing configuration seemed to work well for a lot of the things that we needed to accomplish, and probably avoided incurring some additional costs we'd probably get into if we made a bigger change, which was kind of the part of the theme of alternative one. It was trying to kind of keep the cost down as much as we could, even though it still comes out at $38 million. It was kind of originally envisioned to be our lower cost alternative.
Thanks for that, John. I think, I mean, from my perspective, I always appreciate more transparent trade-offs. So to have something like land use considered as a criteria is really valuable. You know, I think it could potentially be a nice amenity, or there could be more community benefit. So I get what you're saying about freight movement and things like that. But in terms of costs, you know, I would be curious to know, well, I don't know what the value of that surplus property could potentially be. And that seems like something that could certainly offset the cost of other parts of the project. But it's nice to have that as a factor to consider so that the trade-offs are more transparent.
Thank you. John, can I ask, please? I vaguely remember this from the first time we looked at this years ago when I was incredibly overwhelmed with flyovers and roundabouts and all of the things. But I thought I remembered that one of the considerations for safety is that southbound on ramp, the curve of that thing, I thought was one of the safety considerations. But my untrained eye looking at this picture says the curve is not changing by all that much. The radius is going to get a little bit bigger, but not much. Can you convince me that it's worth the expense to change from a radius that is really tight to a radius that's not quite as tight?
Yeah, and I would say that design wasn't the primary motivator wasn't the improvement in the radius of that turn. That's kind of a side benefit. It is a little bit better than what was there before. And I think maybe the situation with the existing addition was it wasn't like a fatal flaw. It was certainly something we'd like to improve. And so really the primary motivator with that design, it was aligning Baker Court and the southbound ramps to get rid of those conflicts.
Got it.
And then like I said, by doing that, by moving it close to the railroad, one of the benefits was we can get a little bit more improvement in that ramp.
That makes perfect sense, John. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Can I have a couple of questions, Barb, is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay. We've got time.
Okay, first thing is, I just noticed on the two light sections, is there a I don't know if this is possible, but if there were roundabouts there and lights only be used if there's a railroad crossing? Because I mean, it sounds like to me the reason why you're using the lights there is because of the coordination of the railroad. So if you had a roundabout, you don't, 98% of the time you wouldn't have to wait for a stoplight. And then the only time you'd have a light there that would be functioning is when the railroad was going through. So I was just wondering if that's a possibility. I know that's probably going to be more costly, but you get more throughput that way.
Yeah, and we looked at it. We kind of went back and forth with the merits of that versus a signal with our committees. And one of the big concern, I think, with the roundabout is if it's, and obviously roundabout's gonna have a little bit bigger footprint at the intersection, so it'd be very close to that rail crossing. But if we signalize, say, the roundabout, right, so we could shut those movements off and clear it out like we would a signal when a rail crossing comes through. I think there's something like 8 crossings a day, and when they do have a crossing, it's shut down for about 2 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
And when we looked at that in the future with like very heavy traffic demand coming in here, right? Because it's already pretty good movements going towards the Chutes River Woods with all that growth coming to the east. We're dealing with a lot of traffic. And with the roundabout, our concern was if you shut off that side of it, once vehicles start coming into this, the circulating roadway, it can shut the whole thing off pretty quickly. And that's potentially, 2 minutes where nobody can leave the southbound ramp. And we were concerned about those queues getting long, getting back to the expressway. Whereas with the traffic signal, we can close that side of the approach down when there's a rail crossing. We can still keep everybody that wants to go to the east, right, moving away from the ramp because it doesn't affect the rail crossing. And so that was kind of one of the big trade-offs and reasons why we decided for that alternative, we preferred to go with the signal.
Okay. The other question I got is for Bob has the trail the multi-use trail, has that been determined yet or not? I know originally you had said it was going to be on the east side, but has that been determined yet?
I don't know. Final determination is the right word, but we're still moving forward with the west to east side alternative that the TSP was approved with, leaving it up to us based on community process. We had declaratory ruling through the county that allows us to put it on that side. So, you know, barring what we foresee as appeals and things like that, the intent is still to put it from the west crossing over near the High Desert Museum to the east side up to Baker Knott.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving pieces.
What's the timing of that, do you think?
I mean, it's scheduled to go to bid later this year. There's some issues around some Forest Service permits and stuff. I would estimate it, you know, we'll move that back to early next year, but some of these appeal processes could take time and adjust the schedule.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, thanks. That's all.
Thank you. I would, and then as far as your comment about a signal, Greg, I have hope and confidence that every year we move forward, signals get better and smarter as far as making somebody wait in the middle of the night when nobody's coming, which causes frustration and causes people to just ignore signals and run through them. So I think we can hope that any signal going in the future or improvements made will help with that consideration. Any other questions or comments for John? And then did we have an action item? Was there something we need to decide? Please, Tyler.
No, I think this did mention, you know, as we work on the MTP update over the next, 5-6 months, is we'll be having a discussion with the board on how we incorporate this as well as, the rest of the projects that have been identified for, particularly US 97, through the MPO area.
All right, then I will say thank you so much to John and to Dawn for being with us today to tell us about this. I will also say evacuation. Wow, have I had evacuation of Deschutes River Woods on my mind from pretty much the moment I moved into this area. So I think, keeping that as a top of mind consideration, even though I understand Councilor Mendez's concerns about those road widths, we just have so many folks who are living over there and might need to leave in a big hurry.
Well, just to clarify, the concern's not about the road width, it's just the lane width. So actually just changing the painted lane widths is shown to have an effect in terms of driver speed and safety. So that's what the question was about.
Thank you, Ari. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. So so it sounds like, ODOT is kind of exactly what you're saying. Even though the road width is wide, the lane widths under normal conditions won't be taking up all that space, but the space will be able to be used in a different way in case of an emergency. What I think I'm hearing them say is that with cones and emergency personnel, we can turn all of that space into 3 lanes for cars, 2 moving out of the emergency area, and 1 just to keep, all emergency traffic moving. Is that?
Just to add to that, Barb, the 12-foot lanes, there are a lot of placeholders now because that's what we've always had, but it's based on, when the project's designed and the parameters of the road, For example, the US 20 out here, the new highway with all the roundabouts, those even on Highway 20 are 11-foot lanes. So, it's just a time and place holder right now. There's 2 differences, right? The roadway width that we need for as many lanes for exiting, but then the striping, in most urban environments, unless it's not going to be on 97 11s yet, just because of the freight impacts. But in most of these other settings, we're moving towards 11-foot lanes when there is heavy bike traffic.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Ari.
I got another question.
It's
I
you,
was
Greg,
just
sorry.
wondering, the 8-foot lanes versus the 12 or 11-foot lanes, was that in a rural area or was that in an urban area?
So I think the recommendation is to consider 9 to 10-foot lanes, but not in all areas.
Because I was just thinking, if you're in a rural area, you're just gonna go no matter what, so. Versus in the urban area, you'd be slower. I can understand that.
Our
So,
lane is 11 feet also.
so I think Ari and I might have the same comment. And yes, we understand this is future consideration. This is not actually designed for something that's being built immediately. You know, I think for myself as well, I would rather see that median at 9 feet and the travel lanes down to that 11 you're talking about, which still preserves that ability to use the space in an emergency. Maybe that is, you know, just for today, my comment.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Okay, I'll say thank you. Thank you so much, John. Thank you, Dawn. We appreciate you being here with us today on a snowy day.
No problem.
Thanks.
Okay, that'll get us to our next agenda item.
Got a sandwich out there.
Great. And this is other business. First of all, we actually, I'm sorry, the last couple of meetings, we really have not even had time for me to say anything other than email me if you have topic requests. Today, we actually have a moment to discuss. If anybody, is there anything you think that this board should be thinking about or discussing?
Just to ask, we left our last long meeting with the update on the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And Chris Majeski had mentioned, I had asked about the focus of these plans, and the city one included, is often on capital projects. And if we really want to move the needle in terms of safety or mode shift, we probably need to pay more attention to some of the programs, incentives, transit plans. And Chris had said, you know, he would kind of think about that balance. I don't think he disagreed necessarily, but historically, these plans have had a real focus on capital projects. And we see this at the city. This is where we get the new unconstrained project list. So we're going to be talking about this at the city next year when we look at our transportation system plan. But I just wanted to know, is there going to be an opportunity to follow up with Chris on that question? Because it would be nice if we can learn anything from our experience at the MPO. I think it would be helpful with the city. So to keep that conversation going, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, and just a quick update on that. You had actually, I mean, you had just mentioned, we talked about programs, but you'd also talked about operations and maintenance costs. And so the consultant team and ourselves have been reaching out and try and get the O&M cost piece figured out.
Great.
There's been a lot of discussion just the last few days on that topic. And then programs, there's also discussion happening, but it's not as fast as the O&M discussion.
I wouldn't expect it to be super fast, but it's an important discussion to have. So I'm glad to hear that.
So it's moving.
There will be opportunities for that. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, ideas on future meetings? You know, you can always call or email myself or Tyler. We are happy, to hear your ideas for what we should be looking into with this board. Great. The next piece of business we do have coming up is the idea of stipends for resident members of our technical advisory committee. Tyler, do you want to talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll just keep it brief. We will be having a full discussion on this scheduled for next month. And I think what we're going to be doing is we're looking at what ODOT, at their stipend policy that they have for their committee members, and looking at the City of Bend stipend policy. And we'll bring some version of a draft policy to the board next month to consider, with policy language, cost implications, that type of thing. So That's all I have, Barb.
That's great, Tyler. For myself, I'm really happy about this. It might not seem like a big deal, but to an individual, it might actually be the difference between participating and not participating. And I continue to be looking for ways to get broader participation from more corners of our community. So thank you to staff who have been working on this. I think it's an important thing. Up on the board, you can see what topics we have in mind for our next meeting. If anybody, again, we have a minute right now. Has anybody got any questions about those topics? I don't think we need to read them off, but that is what we're looking at for our next meeting. If you have any comments or questions as we're getting ready for that meeting, again, please get in touch with myself or Tyler. And with that, I will say that the next meeting is coming up on March 15th at noon. And that brings us to another opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone that would like to make a comment to the MPO board? I don't see any hands from where I am sitting in my warm, comfortable home. Thank you again to everyone for participating today on a snow day. Please be careful out there on the streets and have a lovely long weekend. I think it's a holiday weekend. Thanks again, everyone. James, thank you. We're so happy to have you with us. You and Greg get to keep an eye on us now. We appreciate your participation, and this will adjourn this meeting of the Bend MPO board.
Thanks, Barb.
Thanks, Barb.
Of
Thanks.
course. Before the camera goes off, hey, Bob, can I ask, will you continue to be with us, or are you moving up?
It's still unknown. You should be getting an invite to a stakeholder forum on March 8th. We're